You know, I think the funnest part of recording a voiceover for a nearly hour-long video is re-recording that voiceover because your microphone broke and the program that you use doesn't let you monitor your audio while you're recording. So what we've got for you here today, this is a 1959 Ampeg Jet, also known as a J-12. There were, as near as I can tell, at least 4 different versions of this amplifier that all used slightly different tubes. And they're pretty darn cool. This particular one is from the original design. It's got 2 6SL7 preamp tubes. Those are octal tubes. Then it's got 2 6V6 output and a 5Y3 rectifier. And as you can probably see here, the inside of this amplifier was pretty well chewed up by the mice over the years. And before this project is done, every single capacitor in this thing will be replaced. Typically, I'm not into the idea of replacing, 90% of the capacitors in a 67-year-old amplifier. We're going to do them all, especially given the condition of this thing when I first got it. So what you're seeing me use here, that is my Yihua, Y-I-H-U-A. Man, I cannot remember the name of the... My brain is saying it's like an 836. I don't remember. Anyway, the soldering and desoldering station I use is all housed in one container, I guess you could say. I use them both almost every day. For years, I was using like desolder wick or desolder braid, or a desolder pump. One of the solder sucker handheld things, which I still use that quite a bit as well. Sometimes it's just quicker and easier, but I absolutely love that soldering station. And if you are interested in seeing it, if you maybe want to buy one, you're thinking about doing stuff like this and you want to be able to solder and desolder, I'll have a Amazon affiliates link down in the description box. If you want to get one of those for yourself. And I have no idea what I get when I sell things, or when people use my affiliates link. But hey, it's got to be more than nothing, right? Got a tiny piece of metal in my thumb there. So what you're seeing me do here is just out of really sheer curiosity more than anything else. I've got my, it's a capacitance, resistance, and inductance tester that I had originally gotten to check an old filter choke that had no text on it to see how many henries it was. That's what inductance is measured in. And it's great for that. But the capacitance and resistance tests on it also work really well. And I'll get a link to that down in the description too, if that's something you're interested in. These are tools I use all the time. I like them. Usually the stuff that I buy is not super expensive because I am not rich. I was amazed to find that even some of those paper caps that had been eaten by mice were still not far off of spec. That's pretty incredible, honestly. I think this amplifier spent a lot of time in a barn or a basement because it was absolutely filled with mice leavings and lots of stuff got eaten. There was even a plastic body electrolytic there that had some of the plastic eaten off of it. Yummy. So we've got all those old caps out. Just checking out everything else here. Those 2 caps up on the volume and tone there. I'm checking them in circuit, which normally you wouldn't do. I was just kind of curious before I took them out what it would give me for readings. Like I said, I'm not replacing most of the caps in this. I'm replacing all of the caps in this, so it kind of doesn't matter what they read. But suffice to say, they got replaced. which I believe I'm going to do here in a second. It's almost like foreshadowing when you've had to do the voiceover over again. Just changing the range a little bit. It gives me a 1 if the thing that I'm measuring is higher than the range that I'm in. So I just click it until it gets me to the range that will read whatever component I'm testing. And that was me saying, no! So I'm just checking them out, making sure what value they are so that I can get them snipped out of there and get them replaced. It's always fun work getting old components out of old amps. The solder doesn't flow like it used to. All of the flux and everything inside is wicked out of it over the years, so you're just left with these hard solder blobs that are hard to get hot. But sometimes if you add a little bit of fresh solder to the joint, you can get it to flow again and get that stuff out of there. Just starting doing cap replacements now. Getting the leads bent into place and making sure everything looks tidy. It's always important to get a good mechanical connection on any solder joint that you do. I have seen countless number of amplifiers over the years where people just tack solder leads to places. In fact, I just worked on an amplifier that had a bunch of that in it. And it's not glue. That's not the way you're supposed to do things. You really need to have a good mechanical connection. Before you add any solder to the solder joint. And here this is I like to try to make stuff as pretty as I possibly can. Make stuff fit well, look good. So I'm just kind of getting a length here before I snip off the lead so that I can get everything installed in a nice, tidy way. The top of that lead gets soldered to the sort of top side of the tone pot there, and then the bottom side goes to the outside lead. The tone control in this amplifier works really similarly to the way a tone pot in a guitar works, where the value of the capacitor that is used on the tone pot is just filtering frequencies to ground. So as you turn it up and down, you're changing the amount of that frequency that is getting filtered to ground. Solder lug, So I've got the component up there, getting the solder wet. Of course, the lead pops off in the middle of me trying to do that, so now I've got to get it back into the spot it's supposed to be in before I can get going. The solder that I'm using here is Kester. It's 6337. It's pretty good, pretty darn good stuff. Probably the best solder that I've used. There was some other German solder that a friend of mine gave a little package of to me a while back. That was really nice. It almost flowed like water when it was hot, which is not always a good thing. For years, I used this, let's be honest, probably Chinese-made 6040 solder that was called Activity solder that I got off of Amazon, and it was good solder. I've used it for several years, but I was always buying these little quarter-pound rolls, and I found myself ordering it constantly. I just use so much solder on a regular basis. So the last time I needed to order solder, I just went ahead and got myself I think it's a pound, half pound or a pound, I forget, of the good Kester stuff, and it's really good solder. It flows really well. The flux in it does a good job of helping it flow into the solder joints. It's good stuff. Just checking out my work there. Got to look over the top of my glasses. You'll see a lot of that here. Oh, I'm telling you to hold on. Okay, so where we're at now is I got my old Tektronix oscilloscope that, as you can see by the plastic chipped off of the upper right corner, has seen some things. I got it for super cheap on eBay a few years ago. It came with all the original like paperwork and the little leatherette bag that goes on it for the leads and stuff like that. But what you're seeing me do is coupling caps like these metal films and several others. They have what's called an outside foil. And the generally accepted wisdom is that you should put the outside foil end, which is on only one of the leads, to the ground side so that the ground can shield the signal that's going through the inside of the capacitor for that, extra inch before, going through to wherever its terminated spot is. Now, the funny thing is this amp, from what I could tell, nearly all of the components in it were original. There was a couple here and there. All had the outside foil end to the bottom, which means that the signal was actually on the outside foil. So generally accepted wisdom would be that they were all installed backwards. And to be completely honest with you, I didn't even think about that until after the amp was done. But you can talk to lots of different people about their ideas on that and whether or not it really matters. Generally, I do personally try to make sure that I install them, the way that conventional wisdom says you're supposed to. However, in this amplifier, I did what it was stock, and in the final product, the amp is just dead quiet at idle. I'm not getting any weird RF. The noise floor is extremely minimal, so it's one of those things. Did I do it the way that, you're supposed to? No. Did it work out fine? You're darn tootin' it did. So, but what I'm doing here is I've got the ground lead and the hot lead to my oscilloscope on either lead. And I've got my fingers in between, and that introduces some interference. And I'm reading the waveform to see which side is lower. And the side that gives me lower waveform is the side that is connected correctly for the outside foil. And then I just mark on them with a little Sharpie to tell me, hey, this side is the outside foil side. That way you can orient them, correctly when you install them. So I just grabbed my little caliper here and just measured the distance in between the eyelets on the board so that I could bend the legs of these caps and get them trimmed and get them all in place. I've seen other people will sometimes, they'll bend them with their fingers. They'll just make a big U shape and stick them in. Or sometimes they'll trim one side and solder that side in and then, cut the other lead to match and do that. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. As long as it's installed with a good mechanical connection before you add any solder, it's fine. The component is there to do a job, and if it's installed properly, it's going to do the job. I like to make things pretty because it makes me feel good. But also, another thing along with the way that I do it is I like, especially when I know I'm going to be, soldering, 6-7 components, I get them all fit and I get them in the board, and that way I can just pick up my soldering iron and my solder and just solder every one of those connections in place once the components are installed. A little bit of adjustment here. The first two that I did meet each other at like a V, so the distance between them is slightly longer than just the up and down components. Because, math and science and physics and stuff. And another thing I'll say about the caps that I'm using here is, so I use, for the majority of the components that I use in amplifiers, I get my parts from CE Distribution, which is also Tubes and More, which is also Antique Electronic Supply, which is also Amplified Parts. They're all sister companies, and they're all under the same roof. CE Distribution is their wholesaler account company, whatever. These caps that they sell are pretty inexpensive, and they do not list a brand. So a lot of people, I think, would be like, oh, they're generic. But the thing is like, you know, a company makes them. It's just not listed on them what they are. But I've used literally hundreds of these caps at this point, and all the ones that you see me installing here, all these yellow ones, they are rated for 630 volts. And like I say, I've used lots of them. Back when I had a capacitor tester that could test up to 500 volts, I did test a few on it, and they all were beautifully in spec. Some people are like, oh, this vintage amplifier, you have to use the most expensive Jupiter capacitors, which are made with the blood of Jesus Christ himself. And they are magical capacitors because they are $8 a piece. And that's just hogwash. A part that falls within spec that does job the way that it's supposed to do is going to be great. Now, I have done restorations in the past where I have used like Jupiter condensers because, you know, we wanted to keep something that was rare and original and beautiful, looking beautiful. And honestly, if my customer wants to pay for it, I'll use whatever parts they want me to as long as they're quality. I'm not going to use crap. But yeah. Soldery. I can't wait to see what music I use in the background of this video. Just so that 1 3-second singing right there can be completely dissonant against whatever music I use. Got in my hand right here is a 47 microfarad at 63 volt Vichy cap. It was just something I had on hand. The schematic shows that cap should be a 2550, and the one that was in it was like a 33. So technically speaking, because of the way that cathode bypass cap works, it would be letting through a little bit more bass. Having played the amp at the end, I didn't notice it to make any real appreciable difference. And it's a good quality cap that'll last a really long time, so. So here we are back at the amplifier. You can see that I've got a JJ cap can in there. The cap cans that CE Distribution makes, they actually bought the old Mallory tooling to make the old Mallory style caps, you know, the paper foil caps. And they voltage test them and do all that stuff, and they're really good quality. But my price on them is like $34.95 for most of them, and they're just expensive. And in this one, the original I think was a 40 with two 20 sections and a 10 section. The one that I'm putting in here is a 40 with three 20 sections. One of those is actually used as the filter cap in parallel with the bias resistor for the output. And, I figured why not have just a little bit more filtering there, and also it's going to handle more voltage, there than it's ever going to see. I did modify the chassis a little bit to fit those in there, or to fit that cap in there. I did a nice clean job. I essentially just made that hole a little bit bigger and drilled some holes for the little clasps that hold that cap into place. It works well. It's rated for 500 volts. It'll do a great job. It's a part that's gonna, still be around. And it was $16.95 instead of $34.95, so it saves my dude a little bit of money. The caps that I'm replacing here, those red ones, I believe they were 100 UF at like 12 volts or something. They don't need to have a lot of super high voltage. I believe they're just the cathode bypass caps for the second tube. But these 100-100 MODs that I use are great caps. They're pretty small. They're rated for 105 degrees. And with the low voltage that they're seeing in this amplifier, they should last a long time. You will see that there are some components that are still in the amp here that you're not going to see later. It's just all part of the process. What I'm removing right now is the death cap that somebody had left in the amplifier. I will later be installing a proper power cord that is, grounded properly and all that good stuff. No more death cap. This is the super fun part of me staring at all the tiny wires inside of here that connect to everything. That's the ground I'm working on. And what I did over there was I added a tiny jumper from the negative on the cap can straight to the chassis. Like a cap can, the outside of the can is the negative, so it automatically makes a connection when you install it and solder it to the chassis, but this doesn't have that, so I just added a little jumper wire there. I forget what gauge it is off the top of my head. I want to say it's maybe an 18 solid core. And then the ground for the ground bus at the top comes over to that negative. So I had to do a little bit of fun work getting this new power cord installed. The original, I think, would have probably had a tiny rubber grommet that was missing by the time I got the amplifier, and it just had a 2-prong power cord. There was no strain relief in it originally, from what I could tell. So I had to find a way to get that to hold into the amplifier, you know, to make it secure so it's not tugging on those wires. So what I ended up doing is I added 2 layers of marine heat shrink tubing around that power cable where it goes through the chassis, which that hole was made at the factory all those years ago, and it doesn't really have any sharp edges on it. It's pretty well rounded. But just to protect it, I used 2 layers of heat shrink tubing in there, just to make sure that it stays protected. But then I had a little metal, like wire retainer in my parts. So I twisted it so that it mounted to one of the little bolts, screws, whatever, that holds the clasp in for the filter cap, and made it so that it goes around and grabs the power cord nice and securely. I tightened it onto it, and that power cord does not move. It's nice and sturdy in there. It's not going anywhere. This is one of those funny parts. No. I installed all the tubes and went to tighten the contacts on that tube socket you see me working on right there. I've ground that tool so that I can fit it into the sides inside of tube sockets and push the little clasps. I don't know why I'm using that word so much, but that's what they are. That those little connectors inside of there that make contact with the tube. Because I installed that 6v6 and it was really loose, so I wanted to make sure and retension those because I hadn't done it yet. And I don't know that I showed in this video, but I did end up doing that to all the rest of the tube sockets as well to make sure that they were all tight. It's so funny watching myself install these, knowing I'm about to take them right back out again. So the reason I'm doing this is whenever I do a lot of really major work on an amplifier like this, and there's any doubt in my mind that, I've rewired everything properly, that something's going to go wrong, and I don't want to cook any tubes. So I pulled them all out so that I could turn the amplifier on and check all the filter cap nodes. What you're seeing right there is me finding out that the power switch is worn out and not working properly anymore. I was like, what I'm thinking in my head here right now is, as I'm working on this, is like, is that power switch screwed? Is it not working? Did I do something wrong, or is it the switch? And boom, we come to the next clip where you can see I have replaced the power switch. That's me reminding myself really at the beginning of this clip that, hey, all the voltages are looking good, and we're going to go ahead now and get all the tubes in and start re-looking at the voltages and start doing some tests and see how this thing is going. So I'm just sitting here right now waiting for the thing to warm up a little bit, and then I'm going to grab my voltmeter and get it across the cathode resistor there, cathode bias resistor, so that I can see how much voltage is across the bias resistor. Now, when I originally did this, and in this clip, this is what's happening, is when I connected those, I was not seeing any voltage at my voltmeter. And this is the part where I spend a long time scratching my head and trying to figure out if I had wired something incorrectly. And coming back to this during this voiceover, I actually don't remember at this point what the issue ended up being. It was either that I just wasn't getting a good connection on the legs of that, so it wasn't showing me voltage, or I had like one of the supplies for the filter node wrong. This amp is very confusing because the way that Ampeg originally wired this, if you look at the schematic, which you can't really see here because it's all washed out, pins 2 and 8 on the 5Y3 rectifier are what is sending the B+ into the amplifier, and the schematic only shows that number 8 comes out and sends voltage to the screen supply resistor and as well as the cathode bias resistor, and it just was confusing me because the way they wired it, they actually have 2 separate wires to do what the schematic shows is 1 wire. And I've never been into one of these particular amplifiers before, so I was doing a lot of head scratching. You know it's serious when I just take my glasses completely off so I can look at things. But yeah, so what I'm looking at here is making sure that all of the wiring to all the different filter cap supply nodes are connected the way that they are supposed to be, and being very confused that that there's more than 1 wire, where I'm assuming there should be 1 wire, because that's what the darn schematic shows. It happens. I'm telling you, I don't care what tech you know, they have all at some point spent their time scratching their heads over something that might be obvious. But you know, when you haven't seen it before, you know, there's always that slight learning curve of looking at it and going like, what the hell is going on here? In the long run, I think it's probably healthy to, you know, check things out like this. The internet doesn't have nearly as many good pictures of the insides of these amps as I wish there was. I did find a few, but none of it helped me with the filtering stuff. I had to figure that out on my own. Which I did, because I rock. Let's get you into the final clip here.
Well, hello everybody!
I'm up here. You don't need to see my face.
The 1959 Ampeg J-12 jet is alive again. What you saw in the earlier clip was me fiddling around trying to figure out some things that were going on. I ended up replacing a few more components off camera. The grid stoppers were completely out of spec. One of them was like close to spec. The other one was like double spec. What else did I do? I changed the domino mica capacitors that were in it. They were wildly out of spec. Unfortunately, I just had the SMs on hand. Those are like the black ones that you'll see Brad and Psionic Lyle, you'll see them talk shit on them. Maybe they're not the best part, but I had some on hand and I needed something to get it working, so they're doing the thing. But yeah, I've got it all together. The power cord was a bit of an interesting situation. I ended up making a little clamp that holds it in place. I didn't want to try to drill the hole bigger because it's in the very corner of the chassis. I just didn't want to weaken that spot anymore trying to put a strain relief in there, so I made my own. It's nice and solid, and not only am I going to hold it on the inside, but I'm also going to put one on the outside of the cord, in the side of the cab, so the cord's not going to go anywhere. It's still safe. What else have I done? So right now we're running, I'm going to give you the actual math here on camera. It's nice and warm. I've been playing it for a little bit. So we've got 342 volts plate to cathode. It's 6v6 GTs. Voltage on the cathode right now is basically right at 24. Cathode resistor is 250 ohms. So right now we're looking at 110% plate dissipation per tube. In all the years that I have been working on amplifiers, I have found that very, very few of them are 100%. It might have been closer to 100% in 1959 when voltages coming out of the wall were lower. I don't know that it's necessarily worth cooling it down a whole bunch more. I could stick a 300 ohm resistor in there instead of the 250 and maybe cool it down a little bit. But honestly, if somebody sticks some good modern tubes in this that can handle a little bit more plate voltage and stuff like that, I think it'll be fine. I've worked on modern, like Rebels and stuff like that are like 130% cathode biased. And as you play these, the bias actually goes a little bit low rather than high. So it's not a bad place to be. I'm not going to nitpick it too much at 110% for cathode bias. But yeah, it's working really good. The issue that I'm having now that I'm going to work out probably off camera, to be honest with you, is the tremolo. I'm not sure what's going on. I replaced the caps in the tremolo section. You saw in the beginning, they were all eaten up. I had to replace basically every cap in this. In fact, I did literally replace every cap in this. Mice had just eaten them raw. They were done for. So when I very first turn the tremolo on, I get one and then it just goes back to normal. So I'm going to see if I can suss out what that is. Because that's kind of annoying. What was the other thing? Oh, the other big thing is I was testing this, trying to figure out why I wasn't getting any sound. And I could physically hear my test tone inside the amplifier, like inside the tubes, because it's so quiet down in my shop area right now. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So last ditch effort, after verifying I had plate voltages everywhere and all the cathodes were, everything was good, I was like, man, I haven't been able to test the speaker in this other than I tested polarity, just so I could know, which was out and which was in. And the cone did move for that. It turns out that the speaker is bad. Now, this amplifier, as it came to me, was filled with mouse piss and just disgustingness. In fact, I haven't cleaned the cab yet, and the speaker is still pretty nasty in there. Unfortunately, it's the original Jensen speaker that came in it in 1959, but it's done. It doesn't do a damn thing. So what I have it plugged into right now is my shop Celestion Rocket 50 that I test everything on, basically. I have a little Gallion-Kruger cab from a head a little combo thing that died that I test bass amps with, but neither here nor there. So yeah, I've got a new JJ multi-section cap in here. The cap cans are super expensive. Who knows if they're going to be around forever, and to get literally the same capacity in one of these JJ caps that's good up to 500 volts was like $16 instead of $34 that CE charges, and that's my price. I think they're more than that if you're paying regular price. So yeah, so I made the hole a little bit bigger, and I installed a well, here, I'll show you. You will all learn very quickly that I just don't do cute little cuts in between every single take, because I'm not here making cinematic masterpieces. But if you look there in the corner, you can see the JJ cap, and I added the little retainer for it, and made the hole a bit bigger where it actually mounts to the chassis. Mounts great, fits there beautifully. Yeah, I think it'll do a good job. So, but everything is looking good voltage wise. all the tubes that are in it right now are vintage tubes. It's got 3 Sylvanias in it. The rectifier's a GE, and the first preamp tube is a CBS tube. And I gotta be honest, I don't know whether or not CBS themselves made tubes or if they had another factory make their tubes for them. I'm not sure. It does have a much shorter envelope, and the plates look different than, say, the Sylvania. So I'm not sure if maybe RCA made them for CBS. That's very possible. A lot of that stuff went on back in the day. Sorry, you're not looking at anything right now. So yeah, it sounded really good. Like I said, I've got to mess with the tremolo and get that working. I will get that working before it goes out of the shop. But it's been a pretty big project. A majority of the resistors are still close enough to spec. Like I said, the grid stoppers were way out. The 10K that's supposed to go to the output for the speaker, that goes between one half of the phase inverter and the speaker. I think it's supposed to be sort of like a negative feedback thing. It was way out of spec and crispy, so I ended up putting a new metal film in there. There's enough, voltage and stuff involved in the output transformer. I didn't want to try to chance putting a carbon comp or something like that in there. A metal film will stand the test of time. So, yeah. The other thing that you may or may not have seen me mess with, when I very first tried to turn this on, it was like intermittently turning on, and I thought, did I do something wrong? And actually it turns out that the original switch was just foobar. So I grabbed another switch I had on hand that's just a simple 2-post for the hot, and got that wired in, so that's all nice and proper now. But as I stand here, I've got a shotgun mic pointed right over at all this stuff. It is dead silent. No heater buzz, no nothing. If I turn the guitar up, you'll get, the guitar hearing the transformer. But that's the joy of single coils. But yeah, hopefully my gain will adjust itself here, and I'll play you a couple of notes. My deoxit's trying to commit trash aside here. My desk is an absolute disaster. The humbucker and the bridge right now. I should really tune my guitar before I make these videos, but so there you go. Short little demo of it. Sounds really good. I'm going to figure out the tremolo, and once I get the whole thing cleaned up and put back together, maybe I'll at least add some little clips of the finished cleaned up product, because as it is right now, once again, we're not doing any cuts here. As it is right now, this case is pretty gnarly. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off actually. So, and it might be hard to catch on camera, but it's pretty gross in here. When I first got this, it stunk pretty bad, and it was just absolutely full mouse piss. I literally soaked the entire thing in Lysol because it was so gross, and then just left it out to dry. I haven't done anything to try to clean the grill cloth or the case yet. The Tolex is in pretty decent shape. It's just dirty. Yeah, and the entire thing smells like 50 years of cigarettes. In fact, even after cleaning the inside of this with Lysol and 99% isopropyl alcohol, when I soldered on it, the solder smoke smelled like cigarette. And that's the kind of fun stuff that you get to deal with when you're working on amplifiers that have seen, 66 years worth of life. So, all in good fun. But yeah, it's a fun project. I really dig this amp. I actually love the way it sounds. If I was a rich man, I'd have so many amps. But I think this thing is gonna make somebody real happy. It's gonna find a good home. I'm doing this for a local shop, a guy I've known for a really long time. Yeah, just super pumped for it. Well, here we are. This is the finished product of the 1959 Ampeg J-12 Jet. Sounding awesome. I've been having to swap out tubes here. Turns out I had some noisy tubes that did not rear their ugly heads until the chassis was inside the cabinet, so I did a little bit of swapping out. And also I've noticed that the back panel is a little bit noisy against the chassis when I play, so I might have to put a little foam rubber or something back here so that it's tighter against the chassis. But it's sounding phenomenal. I absolutely love this thing. So I'm just gonna play you some tones, and that'll be the end of this wonderful video. Give you a little bit of gain. Pretty darn cool. Here's the tremolo. pretty damn cool. I super dig this thing. If I was a guy with piles of money to spend, this would be not going anywhere. But, you know, paying bills is always nice. So, that's the end of this build. Like I said, there's a couple things I need to fiddle with. I ended up finding one of the 6v6s that was in it was loud. I had some vintage ones in it because that's what I wanted to try to use. But unfortunately, you know, with age comes noisy tubes. I had to change out one of the 6SL7s. Thankfully, I have a couple on hand for a personal build of my own that I'm not going to be finishing anytime soon. So I stole one of those and put it in. And then I took the 6v6S's that are a matched pair that are practically new that came out of another personal build of mine, because I had them on hand, and I don't play guitar enough to worry about, you know, ordering a pair and making this guy wait even longer. So I stole some out of my own amplifier. But they'll handle the voltages and the bias in this thing really well, and last a long time. So that's the end of it, and hope you enjoyed this super long video, and come back for more. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. You know, I do this stuff because I absolutely love it, and it's nice to be able to pay my bills. So come back.